Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell icon so that you can never miss a beat. I'm going to be bringing on fire guest all 2023. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Mark, for anyone that doesn't know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Mark Goux. I'm out of Connecticut and pretty much a real estate investor that's been very busy and very active for over 8 years. I used to work in the restaurant business for 19 years, and I no longer wanted to have a boss. I wanted to be my own boss. And so I ended up firing my boss one day and decided real estate was the course of action I would take to be an entrepreneur and to make that real money.
Amazing, Mark. So one thing I'd love to get into is tell me about your walk to wealth. What was money like in your household back when you were little, Mark, running around in your diapers and stuff? What was it like growing up in your household? What was the topic of money like? What is the topic of wealth and abundance like growing up in your household?
Well, my parents always worked very hard. We're very middle class. They had full-time jobs. They did pretty well. They ended up buying their home after many, many years and had the financial freedom of home ownership. And they've owned their home for 40 years, but they were living paycheck to paycheck, very hard. And I wanted something just a little bit more than that. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have my own homes that I'm renting out, properties that I'm rehabbing, renovating, flipping, and live that life, that lifelong dream. Financial freedom is where it's at, and being your own boss.
I mean, yeah, agreed 100%. And one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on today, Mark, is because I had the fortune and honor and pleasure to get to know you a little bit more and hear your story. And it's something that isn't your traditional road, right? It isn't your, yeah, I worked a job, went bankrupt, and then started entrepreneurship. You have a very interesting story that I would love for you to share with our audience, right? As you grew out older, as you started growing up, around take us back to your early 20s. What was that like navigating the world at that age and getting into the restaurant in business chain industry relatively earlier on?
Yeah, we chatted about it a little bit, but I'll give everybody, your listeners, if you will, a brief synopsis. At the age of 19, at the age of 18, actually, I was an assistant manager. I ran Burger King's and it paid pretty well. I wanted to be a supervisor, I wanted to be a boss. And so it's a very tough business. And in order to make that real money, you've got to want to ascend the ladder and you want to be the top guy. So while I worked very hard for a year as an assistant manager in two different restaurants, within 1 year at the age of 19, I would now had my own restaurant, supervising 40 people, 5 or 6 managers at the same time, running $1.7 million operation, being in charge of the whole shebang. So responsibility at a very young age taught me well. I was a great guy when they wanted a job and they might have been 35 or 45 applying. We had a lot of teenagers as well, but they didn't always want to listen to the 19-year-old guy. So in order to get that respect, they knew number one, I was the boss. They had to do what they had to do. I treated people very well. I worked in the urban areas in America. And the great thing is, in my 19 years running Burger Kings, I never had a white employee. So that's taught me a lot about diversity, how to work with others, and how to get people to the dance. And I was a training manager for the company, a baby producing machine, if you will. All my managers were transferred throughout the company. And I was very strict, very by the book, procedure oriented. And people came to my restaurant and they were like, wow, this is not like a hood restaurant. And I'm like, well, I really don't know what you mean by that. They have their perception what it could be or should be, but I ran things very smoothly. And my people were very gracious, rose, had a good leader like myself, confided in them, gave a lot of good people opportunities that were in jail. I had a lot of great people that worked for me out of jail. The fact that I gave them another opportunity in life that most people wouldn't give. And they were some of my best workers. So I think when you give people the benefit of the doubt and you hold them accountable from that point forward, you know, they're going to really appreciate the fact that you went out on a limb. So I had a great step. And it was
Yeah,
not
so
always easy, but it was 19 years, two of the roughest restaurants you can imagine, but I got no fear. People are people. Let's go. Let's get it done.
yeah, and that's super amazing because a lot of times most of us don't get granted that responsibility this early on in life or that early on in life. And most of the people listening are around that same age that you were when you started and you got that responsibility. What was it like kind of before we really dive into today's conversation about real estate? Tell us a little bit more. What was it like navigating that? You're running a multi-million dollar corporation or business pretty much for the most part across the several restaurants that you had going on at the same time. You have people that are your superior in terms of age, but not your superior in terms of role and position within the company. So what was it like navigating that time? How did you stay true to yourself and not let the power feed into your ego? Being a young guy making a good chunk of change and with a little bit of status and really growing at in really fast rate. What was it like navigating the world and your businesses at that time?
Well, for me, I thought it was rather easy for me because I'm just a natural born leader. I'm not one that wants to follow anybody. I don't go the normal direction. I don't follow the herd. And that's something that you're going to see with a lot of leaders in real estate. You got to walk to the beat drummer. A lot of people are going to make a lot of mistakes. And you got to think outside the box and so it's the same thing in the restaurant business. There's guidelines, there's policies, there's procedures, and that's your roadmap. So no one necessarily wanted to listen to the young guy.
Yeah.
But when I was the guy in charge of schedules, ordering, orientations, I let everybody know what my culture was. And my culture was going to be the way it was going to be, bringing that restaurant around, clicking on all cylinders, increasing revenue, increasing sales, improving the operation. And we all go into that restaurant and we have bad service. And then people are scratching their head and they don't know why. And it all falls back on the manager, the training, the development, the motivation of the employees. And you just got to know how to get there. So for me, it was pretty easy. I would hold people accountable very well. If I needed 45 staff members, I would probably have 50 on my staff. Three might get suspended in 1 week, two might get fired, but there was going to be accountability and they were going to be responsible for performance. So people knew they had to walk the tight line, the tight rope, if you will. And everybody's like, this guy is on top. There's no getting away with stuff here. But if you're treating people well, they may or may not have had that structure at home. A lot of people really enjoyed that structure. So that's why I did well with it. For me, I had a lot of great people and they seemed to adapt to my standard, my way of doing things. And we always ran a great restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And fast forward a little bit, we're gaining success through in there, and you take a little bit of a different turn. Tell us a little bit about your time wrestling, and because when I hear this story, it's not your typical story. And what did you learn during that time that you spent wrestling professionally? Because that's something that I grew up watching WWE. I grew up watching a lot of my friends. We had the WWE on our PlayStation 2. We had the wrestling action figures and things like that. But you actually went into professional wrestling. A lot of us just dream of it, like maybe one day I'll be a wrestler. You were actually in it. What did that teach you during those years that you spent in there, and how did that apply into your personal and your business success?
Well, I had a great time doing it. I loved it. I was like you. I was a fan, thought I could do it. I did do it. It's just a matter of finding that local training center, someone that's got credibility, someone that's good, someone that's been and no, you've got to be the complete package. You've got to be very marketable. You've got to be excellent in the ring. You got to have the verbal skill, technical skills. Are you a good heel, which is a bad guy? Are you a good baby face, which is the good guy? Can you draw money? At the end of the day, that's what it's about. You could be great in the ring, but if you don't have that charisma, you don't have the verbal skills, you're not going to be able to talk that junk in order to get people to want to come see you get your butt whipped. So for me, I always envisioned it as though I had a bad day at the restaurant, okay, because I was a heel in the wrestling business. I'm pretty good talking a lot of smack. I'm good getting a reaction out of people. I'm not going for the cheers. I was total heel, if you will. And for me, I just envisioned because I wrestled a lot in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, upstate New York, New York City. My ride was always 2 to 2.5 hours. Just envisioning yourself already being at work 10 hours, 10 and a half hours. You're at work at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. You got to get on the road by 4 o'clock to get there by 6:30. And then you don't even know sometimes who your opponent is. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So you may have butterflies in your stomach because you don't know if you're going to be walking out of that ring. You don't know if you're going to be carried out on a stretcher or if I'm going to be the one putting people on that stretcher. Okay. So, in a nutshell, you got to be prepared at all times. And you know what? It opened a lot of doors for me, a lot of opportunities. I took on a lot of great people. I shared a locker room with some great people. And when you first start out in the business, you've got to bring your gear with you because just on the 11th hour, that promoter is going to come up to you and they're going to be like, Noodles, you are on tonight. We need you out there and you're going to be wrestling X person X. And you don't know what's going to happen. Your guard needs to be up. You need to protect yourself at all times. At the same time, I got to remember I got to be at work at 5:30 in the morning. I could break my neck that evening. I may be in the hospital overnight. And you know what? I never had a serious injury other than things I tried in practice. While I was training, I might have had some injuries, almost a broken neck, two knee surgeries, broken tailbone. You name it, it's going to happen in the business. And that's just with you honing your craft.
Yeah.
So
So let me ask you, what you said you ended up one day deciding to finally fire your boss. In terms of like timeline, what day was it? What made you come to that decision? What pushed you over the edge? Because what a lot of us is we get stuck in this security and safety net or this it's almost like a mirage because it's not really security because it could go in a second, you know. And of but the biweekly paycheck or the weekly paycheck and it traps a lot of people and especially once you get a lot of money, and it's almost like you're selling your soul in a way because once you give people a good enough salary, all their dreams die and they just get stuck on autopilot and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing through. And a lot of people are stuck wondering why they're not fulfilled. They're making a lot of money and they're doing a job that they maybe might have originally thought that they love, right? They might have been sold the dream and they thought that they were going to have the best job and going to be able to climb the ranks and it's going to be great and you're going to make a lot of money and you have 2-week paid vacation and you're gonna have paid time off once a year, right? They get sold this dream. What was it really for you that made you come to was it an epiphany or what pushed you over the edge to make you finally decide to pull the trigger and not pull the trigger, pull the plug from working in the industry that you were in?
well, it's a great question and a pretty simple answer in my perspective, because when you're a manager at a restaurant, you're usually on salary. The store manager's on salary. You're working a million hours, and that could be anywhere from 60 to 75. You're working 12 to 14-hour day. And that's why I would always draw the line very thin with the employees because we've all heard the story that I couldn't get out on time. I missed the bus, not me personally, but someone else such and such didn't show up. And anytime people did not show up, there's a drop in the operation, there's a lag in the speed of service, the quality may take a little bit of a dip. The manager is now staying longer, and honestly, you're not getting paid for it. You're getting paid salary. And back in 1986, when I started, I was making $320 a week back then. So what is that? That's quite a while ago, you know? And so for me, it was all about I earned my money. My money was very important to me, what I'm going to be earning. And when I actually left in 2007, I was actually making 70 grand and 2007. And I had maxed out the bonus program 2 years in a row. The first year I made $13,600. And then I was the only one that made bonus. And then they changed the bonus program again and then it got cut. So then I only made 10,200 the next year. And I know to some of your listening audience, they're going to say, well, what's wrong with that? $13,000 in bonus one year. Okay, even though it dropped the second year, you made $10,000 in bonus. Well, on the third year, I was the only guy that made bonus 2 years in a row. They decided to cut my bonus down to $900 a quarter. So even if I made bonus for 4 quarters every quarter, with much harder qualifiers to make that bonus, at best I would have made $3,600. So essentially, you cut 10 grand from my salary, and I'm going above and beyond, working hard, working long, coming early, staying late. And that's when I no longer wanted to do it. And I always wanted to be my own boss. And it's kind of like when I was wrestling professional, the dream was always to be the professional wrestler. I heard people say, "Oh, you're not big enough. You're not muscular enough. You're not 6'3", 260. That's the type of guys that Vince McMahon hires." You know what? I had some skills. I had charisma. I had verbal. My verbal skills were on point, and promoters loved me. So you could build around that. And I must have done something right because, believe it or not, it opened up an opportunity where people saw me in the wrestling business, and my phone rang one day, and it happened to be the producers of Jerry Springer. So Jerry Springer, apparently from someone, heard that I was having some issues with the girlfriend, if you will, and they thought I would be an entertaining person for television. So I just started going out with the girlfriend at that point for a year and a half. And when I was on Jerry Springer in 1999, it was an amazing time down in Chicago. The day of the episode, believe it or not, I woke up and they would not let you out of your hotel because they want to make sure no one got butterflies in the stomach and took off. I woke up and I had no voice. My voice was hoarse. And I was like, oh my God, this is my day that I'm going on national television all around the world, millions of people nationwide. And I've got no voice. And I'm like, someone's got to go get me some tea with lemon. I need some honey. And then by the time the show started, I was good to go. But someone recommended me to go on the show. And I always looked at it as that was a calling for me because I was already a professional wrestler. And now that was going to be part two, where me and my girlfriend, since I was the heel, the bad guy, it was another episode of the Macho Man with Elizabeth, if you will. This boyfriend over here is off the hook. He's a little bit crazy, and she's a sweet, good-looking young lady that just is playing her role for side. So it went well. They wanted me back on the show, and they actually Jerry was making a second movie because he did the movie Ringmaster. They asked me if I would be on the movie. I said, absolutely, give me a call. But they never did the second movie. So
Mm.
for whatever it's worth, I had a great time. I was pretty memorable out there from what people tell me, and I would do it all over again. Wouldn't change a
So,
thing.
Mark, you had quite the journey, and I still remember the first time I heard this. It was at a CT meetup. It was, I think, 2021. It's in one of the second, I think the second to last one before we finally moved to the Stanford venue that we have now. And it was you, Dave, and Ed on the panel. And so I still remember that story. And I was just like, yeah, this guy, I don't know how on earth life took him on this crazy roller coaster ride, but it's quite the journey. And I'm glad that we were able to cross paths. So tell us, you've gone through all this now. You went through the restaurant industry. You did your time in wrestling. You did your time, went on the Jerry Springer show. You experienced national television. What was it like getting into your first deal? Was it a fix and flip or was it a wholesale? I can't remember. What was it like getting your first
Yeah,
real estate deal? How was it like?
the first deal was a fix and flip.
Now,
And I had gone through the CT RIA coaching program. This was 2014. And the property actually was on Craigslist. The young lady was working with her father, who was a mortgage broker, and they were doing wholesaling. So I responded to the ad. And in a nutshell, they had the property on the market for 79,999, 80 grand essentially. And the guy was pretty knowledgeable, but I had just gotten trained. So I'm the whippersnapper, I'm the new guy on the block. You got to know your numbers. And so the young lady, I called her up on the phone. She said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the code to get in. She's a college girl in Brooklyn, New York. She's working with her father, but they have the house under contract. And then in a nutshell, I got into the house. I did my scope of work so I could figure out what the rehab was going to be. They gave their estimate, what they thought it was going to be. And they said that the rehab was 40 grand and that the comps were going to be X amount. They overstated what the comps were going to be. And I just kind of told them, I said, look, I'll be glad to take this thing off your hands. This property, you listed it as a cape. It's not a cape, it's a colonial. So you don't even know what kind of property it is.
yeah, for
And
anyone that doesn't understand the real estate jargon, right? What's the Cape and what's the colonial? Because a lot of my listeners aren't in the real estate space. They're just looking to get into it, right? So, what's the Cape? What's the colonial? Before we keep going.
Well, capes are traditionally your smaller house, if you will. You walk in the front door, your living room is right there, and right behind the living room is your kitchen. Your bedrooms are typically upstairs. They're smaller. They might be around 1,100 to 1,300 square feet. Okay. And it's a very desirable property in a lot of areas, and a lot of people love capes. And you know what? They sell for great numbers. People like ranches, people like capes, people like colonial, you know? I could show you better. If you Googled what a colonial looks like, you could see the difference
Yeah.
right then and there.
Yeah. So
Colonials are
for any
very nice, a little bit more of
yeah,
an open floor plan. Bedrooms typically upstairs, a little bit bigger, 12 to 1,400 square feet, sometimes bigger, but they're just a great house. So it was a colonial. The house needed everything. The rehab that I estimated was about $58,000, but the numbers, what it was going to sell for, were not going to work. Okay. Unless I
yeah.
got creative, thought outside the box. And so when he heard what I was going to offer him on the property, he's like, Mark, look, the property is 79,999. I'm okay as long as there's a seven in the deal. And a lot of the wholesalers out there, a lot of them are great people. A lot of them are misinformed or don't know their numbers. And they may not have spent money on education yet in a coaching program, or they might just try to learn it off of YouTube. And there's some great courses out there. But then again, there's not. They're trying to make an assignment fee on that property. They're trying to make as much as they could, assign it, but the numbers got to make sense for the investor because they're doing the work. They might be trying to make 5 or 10 grand. And if you will, this guy said to me, look, I'm okay as long as there's a seven in the number. So he figured 70 grand. I'm like, well, as long as there's a seven in number, I did my numbers. That number is going to be 57. And he, of course, called me a few choice names, and you got a big set of balls. I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, well, look, the property is going to sell for the right number. Okay. I've got to be able to make a profit too. I know you're going to make a profit even if you sell it at 57,000, because they actually had it under contract with HUD. And I could see how many times this gentleman that had the property paid for extensions and more extensions and more extensions. So he was holding on to that property and paying for these extensions, hoping he could get someone to pick up that property for that much higher number than it should have been. So we ended up doing the deal, and there's special ways that you had to do it. We had to do what they call a double close. And that means I actually am buying the property with my money. He's buying it first from HUD. Okay. And then once he buys it from HUD, I'm coming in with my capital and I'm buying the property from him. Okay. What he was trying to do was just assign the deal. Okay. And the rest, the person comes in at the end and they're basically buying the property. You can't always do that. So it had to be a double closing for it to take place. Otherwise, I would not have been secure.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. That's quite the deal. So to start off right into the real estate game with something as complicated as a double close. Let me ask you. You mentioned CT RIA, which is for anyone that doesn't know, it's the Connecticut Real Estate Investors Association. I reference it all the time here on the podcast, or a good amount of times. But what was that like coaching? Right? Well, how impactful was the coaching on getting started? Because a lot of times, as you said, you can YouTube University a lot of things, but when you're dealing with this many zeros, it's usually a lot better to get someone to guide you, right? Someone that's walked the road down that you're trying to head down, someone that knows the game inside and out, that can help mentor you and help guide you down the right path. And especially when you're doing something like that, for anyone that doesn't know, real estate is, especially in the investing world, especially if you're off market, can be very complicated and very tricky, very fast, especially with some of these deals that are where the property isn't needs a lot of work. So for anyone that wants to get into the fixing flipping space, how impactful was that coaching to you in not only succeeding in your first deal, but getting a steady, thing going with your real estate investing business?
Yeah, well, I think it's very huge because it's like going to school and you're not the expert just yet. You need a mentor, you need a teacher. So I implore anybody out there to get educated. You got to know your numbers because you could lose your shirt on your very first deal. And if you do, it's going to be hard getting out of that rut that you're in. So you want to start off on the right track. You want to speak to the professionals out there that know what they're doing. And T-RIA was a good coaching program. At first, it was owned by Joanne and Lou, and they had Linda on their team as well, who was quite a bit of the spokesperson for the organization. They showed you the market. They showed you what you had to do to get your phone to ring. How do you speak to sellers? Obviously, rehab costs, what to do in the proper order, and all the way through the process to how do you sell your house quickly, fast, building your team, your lawyers, your realtors, your CPA, all about asset protection. And every month, typically, sometimes every other month, they'll have a guest speaker that is part of a what they excel in, what is their expertise. And so you want to pay attention. If you show up only half the time, you're only going to get half the knowledge. Okay. If you show up like when I met you down at the RIA, CT RIA, here you are, front row, front and center, and you're taking in this knowledge for such a young guy. This is how you learn the business. And I was very impressed by you because you were already a realtor. You asked a lot of great questions. Everybody's afraid to put their hand up and ask the questions because there really are no dumb questions. You got to get the answers. If you want to be the best in your business, you want to be good at your trade, you got to have the knowledge. And so with the coaching program, there usually could be 2 or 3 levels depending on the coaching program in your area. If you go to CT RIA in Connecticut, I know they often will have usually 3 tiers. You could call them whatever color you like. Silver is entry level. Maybe it doesn't have as much support. Maybe the gold program is the middle one, a little bit more expensive. That will give you 6 months of coaching, maybe a year based on the price. And then the last one is the higher plan, the most affordable, not most affordable, the most expensive plan, but the most support. And you may go twice as long with the support, with the coaching. You may be able to attend again and again. So it's more positive reinforcement. And for me, when CT RIA, when I was part of their organization, they let the people come back again and again. And so I always showed up to network with the new people, more reinforcement of the knowledge that I learned the first time, the second time, the third time. And it's just you're repeatedly pounding that information in your brain so you could get this knowledge because you want to learn this. This game is not for the faint at heart. If you're going to do this and this is your career, you want to be good at it, you could lose your shirt. So there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And I still remember, like it was yesterday, the question I asked. I remember it was on the subject of mortgage loans and interest rates. Pardon me. And I mentioned something along the lines. I was like, we talked a lot about interest rates for traditional mortgages. What are they like with hard money loans or something along those lines? I think was the question. And then that's when I got a little bit of, I guess, my 5 seconds of fame, I guess, there. And that's how I kind of got connected with you. And I already knew Dave at the time. Me and Dave got licensed. For anyone that doesn't know who I'm talking to, Dave hopped back on somewhere in the teens for the episode. I think like 14. I think it's Dave or something like that. But me and Dave hopped on, and he invited me out to Bridgeport. So I was like, okay, I got my car strapped up, got in rush hour traffic, and kind of just very, very slowly cruised on over to Bridgeport. Well, I think it was like an hour 15 drive, and that's the extent you got to be willing to go. Sometimes you got to be willing to take that drive, an hour, maybe 2 hours, to get to some these opportunities, depending on where you're at. And then when you get there, make the most of it. Like I already interviewed Dave, I interviewed Ed. I've connected with tons of investors in the meetup. I got a couple people that I've learned things that most people will probably never hear about, like syndications and things like that. And I'm very knowledgeable on a lot of different topics. And as you said, it's like this real estate as an agent, for me being a licensed realtor and also attending all these investor meetups, it's night and day the difference that goes on. Like these realtors, majority of them don't know like jack squat about anything really in like investment relating. And it's like you buy your first home into a regular traditional realtor, and that's like that's in that's your first property that you're gonna house hack. And it's like it's so surface level the extent of knowledge that most of these realtors know. And if you're not like constantly and continually putting yourself in these rooms with these other people, it's definitely something that you will be completely in the dark about because I think only about 9% of realtors own their own investment property. So it's like for the vast majority of people that are buying and selling with traditional realtors, you're gonna be in the dark about a lot of the stuff that's going on. And so I wanted to ask you too, and when it came to buying that first property, for anyone that wants to get started in this fix and flipping game, tell us like what should their first step be? I know we just talked about a little bit about attending these meetups wherever they may be locally, or maybe if you don't have one locally, maybe start one, or maybe go online. But what would you say the first step should be for someone close to my age that's willing to get after it, willing to figure it out? Where should they go for guidance and mentorship so that they can get in this journey and get it started? Because it's usually something that most people often procrastinate on because, of course, they don't have money. And I put that in quotation marks for anyone that's listening to the audio. Because once you get into the investor space, you can get very creative when it comes to deals and deal structuring. So, what would someone's first step be if they wanted to get into the fix and flip space?
Well, traditionally, a lot of people are starting off with what they call wholesaling because if they're young, they may not have a lot of money right now to get started. Okay. And a lot of people are going over their program, if you will, at the RIAs, and they're telling you that you don't need any money to get into real estate. Well, a lot of that is true. Okay. Because you could get properties from sellers that are looking to hold the note. Okay. And you could buy this creatively. Okay. At the same time, when you are wholesaling, you could put a $10 deposit down once you negotiate with that Mr. or Mrs. homeowner. And you could put that property under contract and you're looking to find that end buyer. Okay. Someone like myself. So if the numbers align and the numbers work for me, okay, and their after repair value, as we call it in the business, the ARV is accurate and their rehab cost is accurate, that's where you come up with what is an acceptable number that someone should pay for that property. Okay. Well, a guy like yourself, if you're wholesaling that property, you may be trying to make $5,000 in the middle because you're connecting the seller with the buyer. And see, I've got no problem paying wholesalers all day long if the numbers make sense. Okay. Because I'm a busy guy. I'm not sitting down all day, all night marketing, spending all that money on the market. So if you could go out there, you're doing the marketing, whether it be driving for dollars, whether you're buying leads, okay, and you're figuring out who the owner is of that property. You're sending out your yellow letters, your postcards, okay, and you've got connections of people that are selling properties, and you could connect owner with a guy like myself that's a cash buyer, ready to go, that could close quick in 7 days or less. Okay. Or on the timeline of that owner. They may not be looking for something that quick. The traditional 30 days may be good for them, but we also could take that problem off their hand. They may have a ton of stuff in the house. Okay. They may have inherited the house. Okay. It may have been given to them by siblings. Okay. It could be a probate deal. So it's all about they may want a quick exit or they may not. But your job as that wholesaler, you're looking for that buyer to make it quick for that homeowner. And a guy like me will come in all day, every day with an offer. If your numbers make sense, I've got no problem paying you handsomely to do your job with the marketing. The better you negotiate, the better you could do for yourself. But at the end of the day, you got to remember there's got to be enough meat on that bone for that investor who's truly doing all the work. So,
Yeah, so then let me ask you then, how does one begin to learn how to run their numbers? Because it's something that's very can be very subjective at time. And depending on who you ask, like it could be, I don't know, it could be $100,000 for a repair for someone, and then some other person may just put lipstick on a pig and only put like 30,000 into it and sell it. How does one begin to run their numbers? What should people look into? What should people start studying and becoming more knowledgeable on so that they can more accurately predict prices so that when they come to people like you, they can say, "Hey, here's what it is. Here's what it looks like. Here's what you can get out of it," and they get pitched that deal to you.
right. Well, I think it all depends on the exit strategy of that property. And I was a wholesaler. What I would basically say is, hey, you're going to keep this for a buy and hold, a rental, if you will. You may need some less rehab that's going to need to be done in the property. So maybe your rehab is only going to be 25 grand. Okay. Maybe it's only 10 grand. Okay. The cabinets may be fine. You just may replace the countertops. Okay. If it's an old tub and back in the 70s and 80s, they had those blue bathrooms, they had those pink bathrooms, green bath. You know what? For rentals, and I actually do student housing for college kids at the local university. If the tiles are in great shape, you could reglaze the tiles. Okay. You don't need to remove the tub if the tub is in great shape. But if that's a flip property, chances are you may want a brand new tub. You want some nice tile work. Okay. You may want those new cabinets. So you got to see what it's going to take to make that house look great for that potential seller, okay, that potential buyer rather, okay, who's going to want a pristine looking house. And again, going back to if it's a rental, okay, and it's people that are just renting the house, or it could be nurses and it's in a hospital area. They're just looking for a bedroom. They're looking for a decent kitchen. Doesn't have to be brand new. They want a fair price for rent. That could work for them. So I personally, if I was wholesaling a house, I would say if it's a rental, your rehab may be X amount. If it's a flip, okay, the numbers may be tight. It may not work for a flip. It may work for it. You got to let them what you think is the best exit strategy. But ultimately, that buyer should go in there and know what they want to do with that property based on the number.
Yeah.
And
That's
then that's
solid
going to
advice.
dictate, that'll dictate what your rehab will be.
Yeah, and the numbers are everything in this game because one wrong little calculation can lead to a giant, step with the lending, with the funding, with the capital, with the pitching on the deal. And so let me ask you, right? So now you've been in this game almost a decade now. How has this evolved for you? Where has this fix and flipping gotten you? And what are probably like the big three things that you would have done differently had you known what you know now?
Good question. I traditionally have done a lot of big rehabs that most people would traditionally walk away. Everybody wants the deal that you're going to get in and out of very quickly. Carpet, paint, you're done. The problem with that, okay, it, it's not always available because everybody wants the easy ones. Okay. And so for me, I've done a lot of projects that were not necessarily need big foundation repair. I'm not really doing much in that regard. I've had some that needed foundation repair, nothing too drastic, and we took care of it and had no issues. But I'm not looking to buy a property that's got foundation repair and you got to put $60,000 into the foundation. I bought a property once that actually had a fire. And this is rather ironic because you talked about how people get their name out there. And usually when you go to the RIA meetings, there's a lot of newbies. There's a lot of people that are learning, a lot of people taking it in. That's great. You're going to see a lot of people point you to some veterans in the room that have done tons of deals, that own lots of apartments, that do the ugly deals, that, and maybe they go anywhere and everywhere for their market. Maybe they'll travel an hour away. Typically, I'll stay within 30 to 35 minutes of my area. But if the numbers make sense, it's worth doing. But some people aren't going to get out of bed if those numbers are too tight and it's not going to really put anything in your pocket. So for me, I always had some real big projects, typically $100,000 rehabs, maybe a 115. And this is for a property that may sell 280, 270. Maybe I bought it for, I can't really say what I would buy it for. It really depends on the number. If you're putting $100,000 into it and it's going to sell for 280, then it's probably $100,000 house when you're buying it, because there's what we call the Mayo formula, and everybody's got a little bit of a different twist to it based on what that property is going to sell for. Most people traditionally will use 70%. Okay, so let's just use a number as an example. If the property was to sell for $200,000, you're going to multiply it by 70%, which brings you down to $140,000. If you have $40,000 in rehab in that property, okay, then that means $100,000 would be your maximum allowable off. Okay. And so that's kind of the way it is. 70% minus repairs And that's what's going to give you your maximum allowable offer. So if your maximum allowable offer is 100, you may start somewhere around 80. Okay. And you may try to finish 89, 92, because that rehab may have some unforeseen issues that you may not know. So some people could add what they call like Murphy's Law. You could add an extra 15% in your contingency. Sometimes people will add 20. Obviously, the more rehab that's needed, the higher buffer you're going to need.
Hmm.
And so you just got to know your number, because you might change course a little bit during the rehab. A lot of people are happy knocking down walls and they want to do open floor concept. So that way it looks great and it's very popular in this day and age. When you're knocking down more walls, you're opening up the possibility of more problems.
Yeah. Amazing, Mark. Mark, you dropped a lot of nuggets. You really broke it down, the fix and flipping, and you made it, Mayo is something that I've heard just from like just being in a real estate space, and but I haven't actually have anyone bring it up here on the podcast, I don't think. So like you dropped a lot of nuggets. Where can we connect with you at? Where can we find you at if we wanted to know more about what you got going on? And I know you have some maybe potentially like mentorship program coming up. Like, what do you have in store for us in the future as well? Where can we connect with you? What do you have in store?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a few things right now. I think when it comes to new people learning the business, I think one of the tough things for people is walking that property and knowing the numbers. So I partner up with people, I talk to people, I'll help educate some people about what to see when they're looking at a potential property. That's, I think, is huge, with people knowing what they're looking at, how to possibly how to put that offer together, because the rehab and the after repair value is going to dictate what you could purchase for that property. I'm a busy guy, but I also look at it like this. If you're doing wholesaling, I want to be that first guy that you're going to call on the phone so I could potentially buy that property. So that's why I get a lot of leads coming my way, because I'll meet
Yeah.
people like yourself, other wholesalers that are hitting it very hard. And sometimes they just don't know how to put the number together. So I'm willing to walk the properties with people. Okay. If it's something that I think I might be interested in buying. Okay. At the same time, I'm doing what they call getting a lot of my financing financing for my property. I'm getting that from private lenders. So people are funding their deals often using banks. And what I do is I fund 85% of my deals all with private lenders. Regular people like you and I that have done pretty well in life, that want to earn a very high rate of return on their investment capital, on their 401k, their self-directed IRA, and this is how they could put some great money in their pocket. So they essentially become my bank. They are secured with a mortgage on the property. Okay. They are listed on the insurance policy as additionally insured. They are on the title policy, and it's all spelled out in a promissory note. Okay. We'll go over who is the lender, who is the borrower, what is the interest rate I am able to pay you. Okay. How long is the term? Okay. All that information is very important. And with that, I've gotten a lot of private lenders that are funding my deals. So that's why I'm actually able to buy these properties much quicker than most people, because I'm funding my deals mostly with private lending. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it, because now I'm able to make that offer quicker to that homeowner that's looking to move, that's looking to sell. And I'm buying most of my properties 50% off market value, and I'm getting my phone ringing all the time. So that's pretty much what I do. I help a lot of great people that have done well in life, earn a great rate of return on their capital. They win, I win, the seller wins, and everybody's doing well because of that.
Amazing. So now it's time for the final five question. Mark, the way I end every episode, question number one is, what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
What is my most important lesson that I've learned in life?
Yeah, impactful lesson. Yeah.
Impactful lesson. Oh, good question. Well, always take the bull by the horns. Never let anyone tell you no. Do your homework and stay true to your family.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
What is the most admirable trait a person could have? I would have to say character, because if you lie once, they know you're going to lie again. And You don't want anybody talking about you behind your back. Stole my, when you fill that cup up, you know, you don't have character. There's a little hole at the bottom and it's all dripping out. So people got to know that you are the real deal. You're about building relationships. You're honest with your friends, and great person that helps a lot of people. 'Cause I believe if you lead with a servant's heart, it's going to come back to you.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
Oh, wow. I probably don't have an answer. Not there, quite honestly.
Or give us a podcast.
Oh, there's a lot of great podcasts. I think if you were to listen to the CT RIA pod, quite honestly, that is some great stuff. Ed Matthews, great friend, a great guy that I didn't know that well initially. And he's got a wealth of knowledge. He was part of CT RIA as well. Awesome guy, kind, knowledgeable, giving. And again, I think the people that have done well in this business share their time. They're helping others. They want to see the next person succeed just like they did. So when I first started out, maybe something was a little difficult to me. I want to see someone have it maybe a little bit easier. Maybe not make a mistake that I might.
Yeah. And question number 4 is, what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
Legacy I'm trying to leave behind is for my family. You know, much. They're always going to be.
And no matter where someone is in their life right now, what is the first step they should take to embark on their walk to wealth?
Say that again. Repeat that for me.
I said, no matter where anyone is in right now in their life, in their journey, what is the first step they can take to embark on their walk to wealth?
I think they got to have a clear decision what they want to do with their life. And I think that will dictate what your goals come, action you're going to take. I think a lot of people right now are going to high school and they're being fed a lot of crap that doesn't make sense, that has nothing to do with education. Okay. They're being brainwashed. I don't know how to say it. Um,
Indoctrinated?
they're being indoctrinated. The colleges are indoctrinating kids in college.
Yeah, the
And
college is even worse.
it's the social media era, if you will. And everybody's jumping on TikTok and everybody's about to cancel culture. Not everybody, but you get my,
Yeah.
cancel somebody because of what you might have said 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And people grow up, people mature. Kind of like a lot of those people that I was telling you about that did time, went to jail, that worked for me at Burger King. To this very day, I'm still very close with a lot of them. And a lot of them said, you know what? You really were very impactful in my life. I've got many right now that I stay in touch with. I was actually just with a friend that worked for me 28 years ago. I was with him yesterday and we spent 4 hours together. And he wants to partner up on some business, okay, doing business together. And he's a sharp guy, awesome guy. But a lot of these people went on to become lieutenants in the military, basketball coaches, football coaches. I've had people become attorneys that started at the very bottom working in a Burger King. So for me, I think it's all about not following the herd. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do something. Whatever you decide to do, make sure you got a crystal clear vision and you know the steps that it's going to take to move forward and to execute that. And always make sure that the follow up is there because you have to be accountable to yourself. And if you're not going to put your best foot forward and you think this is just some sort of hobby, you're not going to be successful. We've all heard the stories, whether someone became a rapper or a basketball player, on how they started, where they started, and they needed that inspiration. They drilled down on what they had to do to be successful. They came early, they stayed late, they applied themselves. And when some people were treating it as a joke, there were others out there that said, I'm going to show everybody what I can do. I'm going to be that next superstar. And that's the way it was with me in the professional wrestling business. Unfortunately, it lasted 5.5 years because someone hit me in the back end of a car. and an attorney told me that I needed to sit it out. I had severe neck damage and that the lawsuit would be over in 1 year. Well, that took 3 years. And in a nutshell, I had some injuries from it, but no one was going to stop. I'll get back out there and do it again, all over again. But be careful and just apply yourself in anything that you do.
Amazing, Mark. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thanks again for hopping on. Thanks again for just dropping the gems that you did today in today's episode. And I look forward to staying in touch, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to your audience. When you asked me if I'd like to be a guest on your show and you had a young listening audience, there's nothing I like more than helping people succeed. And there's a lot of good information out there. You just got to see. But if anybody would like to reach out to me, they can do so. My phone number, I'll give you that. You can call me 203-464-3682, and or you could send me an email, and my email would be mr.flip.usa@gmail.com. Okay. And I look forward to chatting with anybody out there. And if people want to learn about real estate and they want to invest, or that next private lender out there wants to invest someone that has credibility, I'm willing to talk to them about my private lender program. And I can let them know what they could anticipate extra in their bank account, in their IRA.
All righty, Mark. Well, thanks again, brother. It was a pleasure having you on, and that is all for today.
Appreciate it. Have a great day. And thanks to all your listeners for tuning in.